So yeah, I'll start. My name's Ryan Gates. I help organize this group with Rob and Quinn. We're Code for Fort Lauderdale. We're now part of Code for Miami as well. I work at Ultimate Software. Usually they host us, but obviously with the circumstances, they're not hosting us because we want everybody to be safe and well. Um, but just really found this group on Meetup, like I'm sure many of you, and just got really excited about the possibilities between technology and local government, and civic tech was a really energizing, it's a energizing way to do that. So let's see. I switched over here. So Lewis, you want to introduce yourself? Let's see, maybe I can do. Or maybe in the chat. I know you said it was noisy where you were.
Yeah, my name is Vargas. I'm a software developer. It's kind of noisy over here, so I cannot. I don't want to use my microphone too much. So my kids are around, so they are playing. So I'm a software developer. I have been working in software like 6 years now. I do mostly Java and JavaScript. Um, right now working in a company called QIO. It's an international company, but it's for mostly companies that analytics and stuff like that. Sorry for the noisy background.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you, Lewis. Cindy, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Cindy. I'm a college student, and this is new to me, so I'm not quite sure what you guys expect of me. Sorry. Meaning, like, I'm not quite sure, like, if you guys have questionnaire, like a whole bunch of questionnaire that want answer from me. Like, I'm just really new at this, so sorry.
So the most of the questions will be for Joe. He's kind of our speaker tonight. Mm-hmm. You're more than welcome to ask any questions that you have, and there will probably be some good discussion, hopefully. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's more just learning, especially initially, and then ideally, as time goes on, you can find projects that you enjoy and want to get involved in.
Okay.
All right. Joe, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Joe Kimok. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this. I am running for Broward County State Attorney. Election is August 18th of 2020. I usually wear a suit and tie and usually don't have a beard, but COVID-19 hit us all, I guess. So, but I'm looking forward to having the conversation and just thanks so much for having me.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for coming to talk to us. Pedro, do you want to introduce yourself? You're still muted if you are talking. All right, we'll come back to you, Pedro. Let me know if you get unmuted. Quinn, you want to go?
Just a tip, you can click the screen and then you get your option to mute or unmute. So, you know, the button doesn't always show. My name is Quinn. I help with Rob and Ryan whenever I can. Mostly this whatever's going on in Slack, whatever I see on Twitter, and our GitHub repos. So I'm pretty much I do JavaScript. I don't do too much of it, but JavaScript, I know Java, and I work as a software company as a tester. So that's it. I am currently remote right now. I'm in Virginia, so I'm remote. I was supposed to fly yesterday to Fort Lauderdale, but I guess travel is not the best option right now, so I'll just stay remote for now. That's it.
Rob, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much, Ryan, for leading on this. Thanks, Joe, for joining. My name is Rob. I'm co-lead with Ryan and Quinn for Code for Fort Lauderdale. And yeah, so glad that we're able to meet online like this, first ever. So this is awesome. I'm looking forward to conversation and to learn more about the state attorney and why it could, maybe how technology could potentially impact the position and the ways we can facilitate justice in our community. So thanks again.
Good evening. My name is Roman Mukaseyev. I'm currently a junior student in Florida International University. I found you through the code for Miami. I was working on the project that's called the Badge Watch. It's about we would, track the tweets from a particular area and would try to find out the tweets about the political violence, and not political, police violence. I'm sorry about that. That's basically it. I love cycling. Maybe someone here loves cycling as much as I am. I love to cycle.
Me too.
And that's cool. That's cool, man. And that's basically it. Thank you.
Sheldon, do you want to introduce yourself? Let's see. Don't forget Pedro. Pedro, are you back?
Yes. Hey guys, nice to meet you. Sorry, I didn't realize it. I was trying to set my screen up and I didn't realize I was the next person in the line. So yeah, my name is Pedro Prada. I live here in Weston, Florida, and I work as a consultant for Salesforce. I don't know if you're familiar with the CRM platform. And basically, very recently, started to get involved with coding. And they have a proprietary language which is Apex, which is similar to Java. And also, they recently relaunched their platform, so they're getting more into JavaScript. And before they used to have something called Visual Force, but now that they're launching their new platform, JavaScript is becoming more popular. And due to everything that I've seen and how the technology is driving everything these days, I decided to get my daughter involved. She's sitting next to me. So, I want her to get more engaged with people like you guys that are doing projects and all this. So, I really feel like, I want them to feel comfortable to be part of this group.
That's great. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, no problem. Sheldon, do you want to introduce yourself? If you're having audio-visual issues, we can come back to you. Simon, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I've been a programmer professionally for more than 20 years, mostly in the network services and analytics areas. And it's been more analytics lately. And my hobbies are cycling as well, and math and physics.
Oh, very cool. William, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi. I was new to the Meetup app. I'm a current junior at Florida International University. I'm doing a bachelor's of science in computer science, and I just joined the Meetup for to learn something new.
Oh, well, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yelka, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Yelka Pedram, and I've been a member of Code for Fort Lauderdale for a long time. Principally, I'm very interested in criminal justice reform. Originally, my first project was how to find out how judges rule and what data can we get from the clerk's office, and now trying to inform everybody about a state attorney. This is a rare chance. We've had the same state attorney since 1972. A lot of you were here born, so this is a rare chance. So I'm glad that we have Joe here, and we'll have other candidates as well in the future.
All right, thank you. Allison, do you want to go and introduce yourself? We can't hear you if you are talking. We can always circle back. Andres, do you want to introduce yourself? Oh, Andres left the meeting. All right. So first,
Oh, sorry, I was unmuted. I'm sorry, or muted rather. Sorry, but it's
no
fine.
problem.
Should I keep going or not? I
Yeah,
don't want to
introduce yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd love to meet you.
So my name's Allison Riley. I was doing a full stack web development coursework online at the Flatiron School, finishing up a final project. Well, actually, I still am now. I was relying on restaurant work for employment, of course, well, since the beginning of time. So I'm not doing that right now. I did the code for Miami virtual meetup last week, and I'm doing this one this week because I'm hoping to get involved in some type of open source project, contribute, add to my experience. Hopefully, maybe when the restaurant opens back up, maybe I can get, a new job and not have to go back to restaurants. So yeah, those are my overall reasons for being here. So,
all right, well, thank you for coming.
No problem. Thank you for having the virtual meet.
Yeah, no problem. Let's see. Did Andres ever come back? All right, we'll get started. If they do come back, let me know so they can do introductions as well. So as we said, this is our first time virtual. I would ask that everybody please be patient, please be respectful. If you have a lot of background noise, mute your mics. Everybody's been doing a stellar job of that, so thank you. Also dig people using their cameras. It's nice to see you. If you're ready and prepared for that, that's great. So just like here, many of the groups, just like ours, we are one local version, the code for Fort Lauderdale, what we call a brigade, which is just a local group of Code for America. And groups just like us coming together, we meet all across the country. And there's also Code for All, which is worldwide, and work on very similar projects. A lot of the issues that we see in our communities are issues that aren't isolated to our communities. And that's a big part of what we want to do as far as crowdfunding ideas and leveraging other people's work with their permission, of course, to really solve problems rather than kind of holistically. If we come up with a great system for, say, helping people assist with food assistance or unemployment assistance or something like that, that's the kind of thing that we want to share. We don't want each different community to come up with a different solution for that. So that's a big part of the basis for the brigades, to share the knowledge, the experience, to help us with challenges that we've had, obviously, like this. It's kind of nice for me to see Code for Miami did their first virtual meeting on Monday. So it was kind of cool to take a peek at that and see, what the experience was like. So just that kind of stuff. Let's see. Here's some of the high-level things that we do. We lead and organize civic-minded technologists where you live around brigade activities and campaigns. We open civic data. We build digital libraries in your community, and we help publish and curate open civic data. We deploy civic apps, and we bring apps to the city to help people, to help communities function better, as well as we advocate for more open government. And that's a big part of what we do as far as advocating and showing many of our elected officials the value of open data and how it can help transform their communities for the better. We also contribute to open source civic software. So everything we do is open source, and it's a great way to build your portfolio, to learn a new skill, and just to work on awesome projects that people will use. So I haven't really tested this video on the meeting, so let me know if it's coming through, or if not, we can scrap it and watch it on our own time. Oh, yeah, I don't know if it's possible. Is that working?
There's no sound, Ryan.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. All right, because I was hearing sound, but obviously that's not good enough. Let me see. Okay,
I just dropped the link in the chat too, so if folks want to watch it later, they can.
Yeah, perfect. That's definitely something people can take offline. So we do have to have a pretty hard disclaimer here. That Code for Fort Lauderdale nor Code for Miami endorses any one candidate for Broward State Attorney. Our goal is to help create a better informed electorate and not to support any particular candidate, platform, or viewpoint. So we really appreciate Joe Kimok being here, but this is also to say that we're not endorsing him as a candidate. We're a nonpartisan group. We don't take positions on issues. We do absolutely understand that everyone comes with their viewpoints, and we welcome that. And our group is more about facilitating that discussion, as well as injecting data and other information there so we can kind of guide that discussion. With that, here's some very basic stuff that I found out about Broward State Attorney 101. They enforce state laws through prosecution. And it turns out that it's not actually part of Broward government, but it more has to do with the Judicial Circuit Court, which is in Broward, but they're part of the state, but the county chips in on certain funding, which was kind of interesting because it seems to kind of toe some of those lines. Serves as a legal advisor to the Broward County grand jury and supervises a victim advocate unit that provides case management services to those impacted by domestic violence. So I didn't realize that was part of what the office does, but obviously very important and has a lot of impact on people's lives. All right, so let's cut to the interview. Oh, is somebody trying to say something? Let's see.
It's Joe unmuted his.
I was just unmuting to get ready.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right, Joe. So thank you again for joining us. Before we begin, can you outline a bit more what the position is you're running for? What are the responsibilities? And what power does the position have?
Yeah, so the state attorney is the chief elected prosecutor for Broward County. So he or she really is going to determine where our criminal justice system goes in the future. If you or a loved one are arrested, you're brought to the jail. The state attorney then decides whether to charge you with a crime, how high of a crime to charge you with, whether to seek things like cash bail, whether to seek things like mandatory minimums, and then ultimately, because about 97% of cases are resolved through plea bargain, the state attorney decides what the sentence is going to be. And so, you know, we have had many decades in this country of mass incarceration. You know, the United States leads the world in the number of people that we lock up. And much of that is because of really the unbridled power that we've given state attorneys and district attorneys across the country. The best way to describe it, the way that resonates most with people, if you've ever watched Law and Order, it's the order part, right? It's the prosecutor that's making the decision of what to do with people that have been charged with crimes. The biggest difference is with Law and Order, you know, those are all murders or very, very serious crimes that you see on TV. That isn't actually what we see reflected as the bulk of what makes up our criminal justice system. 80% of cases in our criminal justice system are misdemeanors, very, very low-level offenses that have an extraordinary impact on the lives of the people involved. And so the state attorney decides all of those makes all of those really, really important decisions that affects people's lives for the rest of their lives, depending on how many people, depending on what decision is made. There are communities across the country that over the last 3 or 4 years have elected really progressive prosecutors, decarceral prosecutors, prosecutors that understand that if we're going to really reform our justice system in this country, it takes profound change from the prosecutor's position. And that kind of is what got me involved in this race. But it just underscores how important the position is. Whether you or someone you love are involved in the criminal justice system or not, it touches all of us in some way or another. And so it really has a profound impact on all of our lives.
Okay, so you started to touch a little bit on this, but can you tell us why you think you're the right person for this position?
Sure. I'll tell you a little bit of just kind of the track as far as how I got here. When I graduated from Vanderbilt Law School 10 years ago, I had a whole bunch of options. I had an option to go to Washington, D.C., make a whole bunch of money doing civil work. But I really wanted to, I went to law school because I wanted to fight for justice. I wanted to do something meaningful with my life. And I thought the best way to do that was to become a prosecutor. And so I became a prosecutor here in Broward County, actually. And I was in that office for 3.5 years. During that time, I went there really believing that I was going to fight for justice, that I was going to be the one wearing the white hat. Instead, what I found was that I was spending most of my time putting people in prison for long periods of time for nonviolent offenses. I was fighting the war on drugs. And I was mostly putting young black and brown men in prison for long periods of time. I was a prosecutor in the juvenile division. I prosecuted all the way up through felony. And I grew more and more uncomfortable. I would walk into these courtrooms packed with people, just overflowing with people, mostly poor people. And as I grew more and more uncomfortable, the day that my life really changed, I was at an airport in Atlanta. I picked up a book called The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. It is really what was the seminal treatise on mass incarceration in the United States, in defining what mass incarceration was and what caused it and why we are where we are today. And she was able to articulate for me everything that I had been feeling but never really been able to articulate for myself. We have 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's incarcerated people. We have more black men that are in prison or probation or parole today than we had black men who were enslaved in 1850. And anybody who knows anyone who's ever been convicted of any crime, whether it's a serious felony or all the way down to a low-level misdemeanor, knows that those convictions have extraordinary negative impact on their lives going forward. It makes it harder to get a job, harder to get a loan, harder to go to school, harder to get housing, to get public assistance, harder to get specialized certificates to get a job that has immigration consequences. And so our criminal legal system has really created a caste system, a system where folks who have these convictions are very much treated purposefully as second-class citizens. And so I read the book. It really opened my eyes. I left the office within 3 months, and I went to work on the other side. Right now I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I work for a state agency that only represents people who can't afford a lawyer. And I represent people charged with everything from misdemeanors all the way up to homicides. And I have some folks who are facing the death penalty. It is the best job I've ever had. I'm able to help real people with their families. I'm able to help their families, their loved ones. and I take a lot of pride in the work that I do. I'm very good at it, but I know that for every one person that I'm able to help, there are 100 more folks that are just swallowed by this system that very much is designed to oppress certain groups of people in this country. And so, you know, I had a son 3 years ago, and one day I looked at him when he was a baby, and I said, I'm scared to death to wake up 10 years from now and we still have the same criminal legal system that we have today, and have him be swallowed up by that as well. And so the absolute best way to do that, the best way to fix our criminal justice system in our community, we know, is to elect state attorneys and district attorneys that recognize that problem and will do everything in their power to effectuate that problem. So as far as, you know, why I think I'm the right person for this position, there are, I know one of your next questions is how many more folks are there. There are 10 people in this race. Now, I was the first one in. I announced in March of last year, in a time in which I thought I was going to be going up against the incumbent. The incumbent has been in office since 1976. He very much runs the office like it's the 1980s, very tough on crime, war on drugs, which locks up a lot of people that don't need to be there. A few months after I announced, he announced that he would not be seeking re-election, and that kind of opened up the floodgates to a whole bunch more people jumping in. I'm the only candidate who, from an experience standpoint, I'm the only candidate who's exclusively represents poor people who can't afford a lawyer. I'm one of only 2 candidates who have tried death penalty cases. And then the biggest thing that differentiates me from the rest of them is our policy differences. And there's a whole slew of policy differences. I firmly believe that if we're going to have real change in our criminal justice system, that we need to upend the system. And whether that means, you know, ending the war on drugs by stopping to prosecute possession cases, whether it means stopping to prosecute kids as adults. We suck so many kids into our adult system that end up abused or neglected or come out as more hardened criminals. Whether it means ending cash bail. I am the only candidate who firmly believes that the amount of money that's in your bank account shouldn't determine whether you get out of jail when you're arrested. And so, you know, there are some of the candidates in this race that are law and order, that kind of want to keep the status quo. There are some others that have proposed some minor policy changes. I think all of the other candidates would agree when I say that, you know, the changes that we have proposed go far beyond anything else that any of the other candidates are talking about.
Do you know how many candidates are running?
Yeah, so there's 10 candidates total. There are 8 in the Democratic primary. There's 1 independent and there's 1 Republican. You know, Broward County is about 51% Democrat, registered Democrats right now. And then the other 49% are split between independents and Republicans. So obviously anything can happen, but the very, very strong consensus is that whoever wins the Democratic primary is likely to win in November.
And what about technology? Are you more or less technically savvy than your fellow candidates? And we could start there.
Yeah, so I don't want to speak for the other candidates as far as how technically savvy they are. I think I'm probably above average for whatever a 38-year-old person would be, but I'm by no means a technical expert. I will say that as far as the usage of which is not quite technology, but the usage of social media. From our campaign, we're far and above where anybody else is in our ability to both reach people and specifically reach voters that we believe will be voting in the August primary, in getting our message out. But the criminal justice system as a whole, as I'm sure you all know, in alignment with many, is very much in alignment with other parts of our government, and that they're way behind in technology. I mean, just way, way behind. You walk into courthouses or prisons across the state of Florida, and it's like stepping backwards 30 years. I mean, from basic stuff. So there's huge advances that we need there.
Let's see. Do you know if there's a budget for technology in the Broward State Attorney's Office?
Excuse me. So there is very little budget for the state attorney. For the state attorney's budget. State attorney's budget is about $41.4 million. The vast majority of that is used on employee salaries. The only, I guess, way that they spend money on technology is in court stuff. You know, on audio visual stuff, on making it, on being able to present their cases to a jury. They still have paper files, so every file is still in big folders that prosecutors lug to the courtrooms. They have very little way of actually communicating with one another, which is important because in a office of 212 assistant state attorneys, where decisions often need to be made quickly, it takes them 3 days to meet with one another. From the justice system as a whole, you know, their ability to collect and then synthesize data is non-existent. Their ability to make the justice system transparent and accessible to the outside world is non-existent. So my guess is that, you know, unless those of you that are watching, unless you have a loved one or you yourself have gone through the system, everything that you know about it, you probably know through the media or through movies and television, which is a big problem because then it's skewed by the storyteller, right? We've seen some really progressive things going on, especially in New York and in some other communities where folks are using technology to bring stories from the courtroom to the general public, which allows them to see kind of how this system is oppressing people, which promotes change, right? And so, you know, the capacity to make the system transparent to people is there. We just haven't had anybody, you know, taking that leadership role to do it.
So I know some people are putting in some questions on the chat. That's great. Continue to do that. We are going to have a section where we ask for general questions from everyone that's attending. But we're going to finish up some of the other questions first. So I feel like you kind of led into it, but specifically, what are some technological changes that you would like to see made in the office if you were elected?
Yeah, so one, we got to make case files digital, right? So that's very easy. That's you know, that would increase the efficiency of the office exponentially. But then, more importantly, to like the outside world, is we can use technology to make this system transparent, and to people, but then also use technology to make it accessible to folks that are involved in the system themselves. So a perfect example, there are some communities that have the technology to send reminders of court dates to everybody. Thousands of people show up to the Broward County Courthouse every day. And if right now, if you miss your court date, a warrant will be issued for your arrest, you'll go to jail. Well, sometimes people forget about their court dates. Sometimes they have work. Sometimes they didn't know that a court date existed. Through really basic, technology, places like San Francisco and St. Louis have developed a system whereby they can text everybody the day before their court date that you need to show up to court. In those systems, they've seen warrants for people's arrests go down significantly because of that. From a state attorney's perspective, we have to, you talked about building digital libraries earlier. It is absolutely imperative that we create the technological infrastructure to build and collect data about crimes. And what I mean by that is this. So for example, if a 22-year-old is arrested for stealing stuff at a Target, right? Maybe they were arrested once before when they're 17. The maximum penalty for that's going to be 5 years in prison. The minimum penalty is going to be diversion and one meeting of a diversion program, and then there's a whole host of available options in between. We still don't know right now what the best combination of punishments are for that person to maximize the likelihood that they won't recidivate down the road. They won't repeat that down the road. But that has happened, over the last 20 years. That exact scenario has happened dozens and dozens of times in our local community. And if we had some sort of way to, if we had been collecting that data and analyzing that data this whole time, then we could start building our punishment programs around it so that we're maximizing our ability to reduce recidivism down the road. That isn't really something that has happened anywhere other than in the last few years. They're starting this data collection in some cities. We have to bring that here. It's not something that's going to help a year from now, but it is something that will help extraordinarily 10 years from now, so that we're not locking people up needlessly. We're not locking people up longer than we should be to reduce recidivism, but we're also not giving them less of a punishment than we should be to reduce recidivism. And so, I think those are some of the most pressing needs. But there's an extraordinary number of opportunities for technology to be able to both increase the functioning of the office itself, but more importantly, to use it to start dismantling mass incarceration and really being smart about our justice system. We have this kind of dynamic in this country that's been the conversation for a long time, is either you're tough on crime or you're soft on crime. That's what kind of they have thrown, those that oppose any kind of real reform say, well, you're soft on crime. What we say is we need to be smart on crime. And we have some data from mostly universities and professors that study this stuff. But we have not been collecting the data that we need to figure out what really works on a micro level. and we can do that.
So I feel like you answered kind of the latter part of this, but the first part of the next question was, what are the biggest technical challenges faced by the office? Like, why do you think certain parts of this haven't been implemented yet?
The biggest part, I think, is just the will. We have not had a state attorney here in Broward County or state or district attorneys across the country who are particularly interested in being smart on crime. They got elected by being tough on crime. We are going to sentence people to the biggest possible sentence that we can come up with, because that's what gets us reelected, because voters have traditionally liked that. And so there just isn't a will to change the way that things have been operated on the last couple of decades. Where we have seen technology advances is using technology to do that, right? Using technology to put people away. So we see it in forensic evidence and fingerprint DNA. We see it in the ways that, like I said earlier, evidence is presented to juries. We have invested money in advancing those technologies. We have not invested in it in a more systemic level. Is how do we reduce crime and reduce the number of people that are behind bars?
So that kind of gets to the next question that I wanted to ask. If your office could be considered to deliver a service, what would that service be?
Keeping people safe and keeping people free, right? And so for decades, we in the United States have defined safety as locking as many people up who we feel remotely uncomfortable about as we can, to keep them away from us. And what we have learned is that not only is that wrong morally, and there are real moral discussions that we can have about that. People can have strong disagreements about that. But systemically, it hasn't worked to keep us safe. We know that the second we put handcuffs on a kid, they're less likely to graduate high school and more likely to commit crimes when they become an adult. We know that the second that we arrest, somebody for a low-level offense, and they spend even one night in jail, they're likely to lose their job, lose their housing, and then resort to crime later on. We know that recidivism rates for people who actually go to prison are extraordinarily high, because folks who go there on the vast majority of crimes being nonviolent offenses go to prison, they're abused themselves, they learn how to survive, they come out angry and with serious mental health issues, and then, oh, by the way, we tell them you can't get a job, you can't get housing, you can't get public assistance because of your conviction, and then we blame them when they resort to crime going forward. And so, not only, at least in my opinion, is locking so many people up wrong, but it has kept us less safe because we've been doing it. And so the question as far as what service do you provide, it's an extraordinary question, because the answer to that question for so long has been, well, we lock bad people up. And that doesn't, I guess that philosophy hasn't kept us safe. And so what our campaign is very much about is, we will be judged on how safe we keep all of our communities, not just, I think it was Pedro said he lives in Weston. I live in Weston too. We have a very safe community here. But we are not judged just on how we keep certain communities safe. We'll be judged on how we keep all of our communities safe in Broward County. And that means both safe from violence, but it also means being safe from police violence, from being harassed by police as you're walking down the street, from being stopped and frisked by police as you're walking down the street. And so, you know, those will be the things that we are judged on once, you know, when as we go from our first term into our second term.
And are there specific policy challenges that stop you from improving service delivery?
So as far as policy challenges, I guess, you know, as state attorney, we make the policy. We get to determine what the policy will be as far as who gets charged, what they get charged with. We are limited by some state laws as far as how far we can go. Although I'm looking forward to challenging some of that too. You know, I guess the best example that I can think of is the state attorney in Orlando a couple of years ago announced that she would no longer be seeking the death penalty. In her view, which is a view that I share, the death penalty has never ever been about the worst of the worst in this country. It's been about race. It's been about mental illness. It's been about poverty. Those have been the things that have fueled the death penalty. She decided that, you know, the economic cost is about 20 times higher to put somebody to death as it is to give them a life sentence. And so what she determined was that she decided she wasn't going to seek the death penalty anymore. And the Governor Scott, as a result of that, came in and removed all of her death penalty cases from her and gave them to another prosecutor. And so she was kind of prohibited from delivering that service of increased justice that she saw because of actions of the governor. And so, you know, there are some limitations as far as what the state attorney can do. They have to act within the law. But there's real creative ways, I think, that we can enforce the law and do ways that keeps all of us safe and keeps as many people out of jail that don't need to be there as we can.
Okay. And now I was going to open it up to some questions. Let's see. Messages. Yeah, I don't know who wants to go first. Do you want me to read your questions, or do you want to ask them yourselves?
I think just read them and note who asked them if you want.
Okay.
The bottom section of the doc.
Okay, let me see. Try to take it from the top.
Cindy's on the top of the doc.
I have questions regarding the like expulsion. Now, rather than go with expulsions, why not do amnesty? You know, to prevent them from getting into prison and get a record in the beginning. Like, is there a way? Let me phrase that. Do you think legislator can make a law in a way where people would get an amnesty, but they have to sign some sort of document where they agree not to do it again or something like that? But hold some sort of collaterals in case they do, you know, do repetitive actions that they're not supposed to do.
Sure. So what Cindy's talking about is there is a process for some people who, after they've been convicted of a crime, to apply to have their arrest and conviction expunged, wiped from their record. It's only allowed for a small number of offenses, and it's really, really difficult to get. Many times you have to get a lawyer. Depending on the process you've gone through, you may have to go to the governor in order to get it done. Under Governor Scott, the backlog for that was in the thousands. He deliberately slowed that down. So it's really, really difficult to get crimes expunged for a lot of people. And so I think Cindy's question goes to, well, how do we maybe prevent it on the front end, right? So that they don't get that conviction on the front end. And Cindy, I got to tell you, it's a great question because it is a question that progressive prosecutors across the country have been asking and are starting to implement in their jurisdictions now. So what we say in our campaign is diversion should be the rule, not the exception, right? There is, for nonviolent offenses, there is almost nothing that I can't do through a really, really robust, structured diversion program that I couldn't do if I required the person to get a conviction. And so what diversion is it takes the person out of the criminal justice system. You've been arrested for stealing from Walmart. You've been arrested for trespassing at a gas station. You've been arrested for possession of drugs. What we do is we design a really a structured diversion program, a program that keeps you out of the system, that is designed for your the issues that caused your crime, right? The underlying issues. Maybe the underlying issue in your crime was addiction. You're addicted to drugs or alcohol. Maybe the underlying issue with your crime is homelessness or poverty. And so we can address those things through a diversion program in a way that keeps convictions off people's records. My 3-year-old just walked in, sorry. I thought we were going to go viral there for a second. To keep those convictions off people's records so that we're not saddling them for the rest of their lives. Instead, what's happening right now, somebody gets arrested from stealing from Walmart, they go into court, they take a plea of, a year or 18 months probation, they go through the system, and then in 18 months they think they're done, but they've got that conviction on their record for the rest of their lives. And that's where the harm is. That's where the vast majority of the harm for people's lives is coming from, as opposed to on the front end. And so we are very, very aggressive and need to be very, very aggressive in making diversion programs the rule. Now, there are some folks who, repeat offenses a lot. There are some folks who are committing violent crimes, who are a real harm, pose a real threat to the community. And for those folks, we're going to have to continue prosecuting them. But for people that make mistakes that don't hurt people, for people that, find themselves in bad parts of their life, there's just smarter ways to both allow them to keep their freedom going forward and to decrease the likelihood that they'll recidivate going forward. I hope that answered the question, Cindy.
Thank you. It is.
Roman had one too. If you want to ask it, Roman, or I can read it for you. He said, "What is your position on facial recognition cameras in public places?" And as a follow-up, Yelka added, what are your thoughts on deep fakes in camera databases around biases? So first was Roman's on facial recognition cameras in public places.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just facial recognition cameras, right? I mean, we're already using license plate cameras that are literally tracking your license plate everywhere you go, and they're using them to solve crime. And so it's a really, it really kind of shows the tension there between kind of civil liberties. You don't want Big Brother following you around versus, you know, we want to be able to solve crimes. My feeling is I'm against all of that. I'm against the usage of cameras to track license plates. I'm definitely against facial recognition cameras used in public places. I think that there are some places where those types of things may be appropriate for protection of people, schools, airports, you know, places where people congregate, that if we can use those to protect people in those ways. But just from a civil liberty standpoint, to me, the reduction in freedom that comes with that particular technology in the constant tracking of folks outweighs, you know, us being able to more quickly catch people who may steal some cars or things along those lines.
Gotcha. And then just as the follow-up, for Yelka's comment around deep fakes, one, I guess, are you aware of what a deep fake is? And two is, what are your thoughts on around using things like deep fakes, or I'm guessing those larger camera databases that they're using to address bias?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't. I know what a deep fake is, just from watching the news. I would not say that I'm a particular expert in them. I've seen one where they had Obama giving a whole speech that he clearly never gave. We haven't really seen them in crimes yet. I think I can maybe envision a future where that could happen. I guess, Yelka, as far as your bias question, I just ask you to follow up on that. What do you mean as far as like the use of them to address bias?
Right now, my database might be there might be places that look a certain way. So adding more, say, white places to a criminal database, even though they're not real people, they're just deep fakes.
You're coming in really garbled, Yelka. Would you mind maybe typing it into the chat for now?
Okay, while she writes that out, just to comment on, I think it was in Hillsborough, the state attorney there is looking to restore felon voting rights.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the process of how this proceeding with Amendment 4, and are you for like something like a rocket docket where we could like reactivate people's rights faster?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, that's a really, really great opportunity. We were talking about technology earlier, for technology to play a role in that. I mean, look, the voters of Florida voted overwhelmingly to restore voting rights for people. That has been significantly hampered by subsequent legislation that prevents people with outstanding fines and fees from voting. And I think a lot of the disconnect there has been that folks don't understand how much these fines and fees are, and how difficult it is to even find out whether you have fines and fees. So if I was convicted of a crime in the 1990s, likely they would have imposed several $100s of fines and fees at the time I was sentenced without me even knowing. I mean, we don't even tell people that we're imposing these fines and fees today when we sentence them. And so several $100s of fines and fees would likely have been imposed on me. I would have finished my sentence in the 90s, been a convicted felon, thought I was completely done. And now I go and register to vote, and I'm told, no, you have fines and fees. You can't register to vote. If I ask how much my fines and fees are, the supervisor of elections doesn't know. That data is in the clerk's office and is likely sitting in some warehouse in archives somewhere. So I'll then go to the clerk's office and say, I'd like to pay my fines and fees. Can you tell me how much it is? And the clerk's office will take my information. In some jurisdictions, they will charge me in order to find out how much my fines and fees are, because it costs them money to go to archives to find it out. They'll come back with me a couple days later. They'll tell me how much it is. And then they'll give me the privilege of paying my fines and fees. If it's something I can afford, great. If not, as is the case with most folks, that there are many folks that have been convicted of a felony, then I'm not going to be able to re-register to vote. What Andrew Warren is doing, and in Tampa, KFR has done it to an extent in Miami, is set up these rocket dockets to have folks come in to get those fines and fees either waived completely, or at least waived for the purposes of voting, to allow folks to vote. Our state attorney has not done that, has not lifted a finger to try to help anybody to try to get them registered to vote. But even in those jurisdictions, they've seen significant challenges in getting that information to the felons themselves, or the returning citizens themselves. So there's a whole bunch of really misleading information that's out there as far as whether returning citizens can vote or how they can do that. And so what they've seen in some of these other jurisdictions is there has not been this kind of line at the door of the courthouse to get those fines and fees waived, because most folks don't know the process by which they can do that. And so technology can really go a long ways, and I think both technology and organizing, frankly, and FRRC is doing this heavy work in identifying those folks that still have fines and fees there, getting them into court to waive them, so that we can get them registered.
Mr. Kimok, I have a question.
Hi, Cindy.
Okay, so in my opinion, Sweden has one of the lowest crime rate compared to other countries. I think a part of the reason why their crime rate is low is because they do humanitarian approach. They try to educate their criminal rather than just making it rather than making prison and jail as a place of punishment. So my question to you is, if America were to create a legal system where it's much better than Sweden's legal system, do you think that the crime rate in America would tremendously decrease? Because
yes,
their legal system is not perfect, because they still have some crime rate as far as Sweden. So I would say, would be better to create a legal system that's better than theirs. So this way, America could become a country that has no crime rate at all. So anyway, so you would agree it would definitely be a good thing if America were to create a better legal system than Sweden legal system. I think I heard the right thing.
Yes. If you walk into a prison in Sweden, it looks like it looks like a college dorm. I mean, folks are going to classes. They have extraordinary connection. They're making extraordinary connections with their loved ones and people in their community. They go above and beyond to address the underlying cause of crime, as opposed to just trying to punish people. And that's really the difference. And here in the United States, we have not had any particular desire to figure out what's causing crime and then addressing the underlying things that are causing the crime. Instead, we've just been punishing people. And so there's a whole host of reasons why, you know, a place like Sweden has a lower crime rate. Some of it, frankly, is they don't have some of the institutional challenges that we in the United States have. So poverty, they do not have the levels of poverty that we see here. We know that the absolute best way to reduce crime is to reduce poverty. We also have some very significant racial issues that we have had for several hundred years, in that has perpetuated crime here in the United States. But you know, we talk about reforming our criminal justice system. We have best practices from around the world. We have places, not just Sweden, but in Germany and in France, even in South America, where they have significantly lower crime rates without locking up as many people as we do. And so, you know, we very much can take all of the, if we were smart, we would take all of these best practices from around the world and implement them here.
Thank you for answering my question.
I want to make sure, back to Yelka's question too, so related to the deep fakes, I think she was more so related to making sure that we have right mix of people, so related to like diversity, because as more people taking their photos, like if the samples are already in their system are more likely to identify like Black and brown people especially, then what are your thoughts on making sure, in addition, Pedram asked a similar question related to police lineups, how can using the types of imaging materials like the deep fakes potentially be used to reduce the probability of a real person being misidentified? If you had any thoughts on that, I'm curious if you'd like to share.
Well, I've actually, you know, litigated motions on the program that's used now to generate photo lineups. Look, eyewitness misidentification is the #1 cause of wrongful convictions. We know that it happens. I had a case once where it was a robbery case. They put together a police lineup using a computer that supposedly took my client's photo and then found a whole bunch of photos that was supposed to look like my client. But the photo that they used for my client, he'd never been in trouble before, so it was a driver's license photo, and all of the other ones were mugshots. And so when and there's a very distinct looking difference between a driver's license photo and a mugshot. So when the victim looked at the lineup, they saw one photograph that was distinctly different from the other 5 and picked out my client. Now that was something that we were able to find out through really like heavy litigation and show both the judge to show the judge and we were able to get the case dismissed. But you know, those types of, you know, eyewitness identification happens in a million different realms. I'm still not entirely sure, I guess, about your question as far as how deep fakes play into that. Like, I certainly won't be creating deep fakes, and I don't know that there's any move on the behest of law enforcement to create them to help generate lineups or anything of that nature. But from a eyewitness identification perspective, there's extraordinary problems with the way that the system allows identifications to be presented to the jury.
Gotcha. Thanks again for diving in. I know that question was kind of in left field a little bit, but some of our members have actually been tinkering with deepfakes and like police lineup tools and stuff like that. So we'll be able to send you over some test stuff for what we're working on too.
Okay, great. Let me also say, you know, as somebody who's running for office now, I'm particularly interested in how we're going to see that affecting elections. You know, both in 2020 and going forward. I think we're definitely going to see some. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, definitely. Ryan, did you want to grab Yelka's last question?
Let's see. What was the last question? Will you support opening the state attorney office's data for the community? Excuse me. If you get elected?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, not only opening up the data to the community, but inviting the community in to help us synthesize the data, right? And so, perfect example, district attorney in Milwaukee got elected, I think it was 4 years ago now, on a platform of reducing racial disparities. They had some really significant racial disparities. They were arresting, despite the fact that Black people were a significant minority in their city, they were arresting Black people at a much higher rate than white people for committing offenses that white people were committing just as much or sometimes more. So he gets elected on that premise that he's gonna reduce racial disparities, which is something that we've talked about. But then he gets into office and recognizes that he's not entirely sure how to do that because, you know, it is extraordinarily difficult to reduce implicit bias, right? In all of us, right? We can all, I think, recognize that we're not going to be explicitly racist, or at least we think we're not going to be explicitly racist. But all of us have implicit biases. Everybody at this meeting, and so trying to figure out how to fix that is a much more difficult question. And so what he did was he invited researchers from universities around the country and said, look at my arrest data, look at my charging data, tell me where I'm charging Black people either at a higher percentage rate or more harshly than I am white people. And it took them less than a year to look at all of that data and then be able to make recommendations, very specific recommendations as to how they could change their charging decisions. And they saw an elimination of racial disparities in their charging decisions within a year after that. Andrew Warren up in Tampa has done a good job of this as well. He has also been really proactive in inviting people in to look at his data. And then he releases a report every year showing how data has how he has used data to both reduce incarceration rates and racial disparities. More to Yelka's question is you know, we need to go beyond that, beyond just releasing the reports. I think we need to release that raw data of this is everything that we're doing. These are all the charging decisions we're making. These are the punishment decisions we're making. These are the recidivism rates that we're seeing, so that we can not only have experts who we've invited in to tell us how to fix things, but we can almost open source it, right? If we release that data to the public, where universities around the country or ordinary citizens around the country can easily get a hold of it and take a look at it themselves, they can make us better moving forward. I see that there are I actually see that there are a ton of questions here that obviously we're probably not going to get to all of them. But while we have a little lull here, What I can do is, Ryan, do you have either email addresses from everybody that has joined, or is there any way for me to get them?
Unfortunately, I don't have the email addresses. This is being recorded, so we can get the transcript that's also being recorded
Okay.
of the chat. I could certainly say, yeah.
Okay.
So if you want to email code44ftl@gmail.com.
Yeah,
we can kind of pass questions and answers back and forth.
I think that might be good. What I can do is since this is being recorded, maybe afterwards you can show me how to download the chat. And actually, I think I see it right now. And then what I can do is over the next couple of days, I'll go through and look at everybody's questions and maybe just type up some responses for everybody. Then you'll have my email address, and obviously you can go with follow-up questions as well. I also have a website while we have a lull. I know some people were quoting from it, www.joekimok.com. It has our full platform on there. We're constantly updating it as we go through the campaign as well. So, and then I have a Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's all Joe Kimok.
Okay.
Sweet. And Ryan, if you want to drop the Slack invite link in the chat, just for folks, if they want to carry on this conversation in any specific format, the Slack is likely the best place to continue those threads. And in the meantime, Joe, just in kind of getting away from all this tech and kind of heavier topics, I'd like to know a little bit more just in terms of you in this race. This is the first time you ran for something. What do you do to like wind down or step away from all this campaign stuff? If you could share a little bit more on the softer side of the race.
Sure. I have, as I said earlier, I have a 3-year-old son, and then 3 weeks ago now, my wife and I, or my wife gave birth to our daughter. So I have a newborn who is actually, I can hear crying in the other room right now. So right now it's a lot of family. The coronavirus shutdown has enabled me to pick up a book for the first time in probably 6 months, a novel. I was an English literature major as well, so haven't been able to read as much as since the campaign as I would have liked to, but that's been really helpful for me as well. And then I run a lot. I ran a marathon, I guess, 3 years ago now. But that's my kind of other way to wind down.
Awesome.
Congratulations on your daughter. That's huge news for your family.
I haven't slept in 3 weeks, but okay.
I've been there. I have twin daughters. They're 4 years old now, but I remember.
I can't imagine twins, but 2 right now is it's pretty hard, but it's fun.
Okay, yeah. So I think we're going to wrap up now. Thank you very much, Joe Kimok. Really appreciate you taking the time to come out here and talk with us. Really appreciate everybody's patience with the audio and working with us. This is our first time doing it. So I think it went pretty well. I appreciate everybody coming out and sharing. So thank you again.
Yes. And Joe, can you remind us what date is the election again? When should we be voting?
August 18th, 2020. There's obviously early voting. Tell your friends, tell your family, like our Facebook page. Yeah, hope to see you then.
Awesome. And yeah, I think if we just roll through the last slides and show people how they could jump into the Slack and where they could look for the other tools. Joe, you mentioned something similar to actually something that's existed in other brigades, CourtBot, the text message tool for the court alerts. We've been various levels of interest trying to get something spun up locally as well here in Broward to do that. So if you have any thoughts on how we may be able to progress with that, we want to fork a project that already exists in another city and just change up the number because it's a text message based solution. People get text messaged about an upcoming court date, but we're still learning through the back end of that. It uses a technology called Ruby on Rails that some folks aren't too familiar with. So still getting up to speed on that, but yeah, definitely excited to keep this conversation going and appreciate you joining with us today.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, you need one of the stakeholders, either the clerk's office, the state attorney, or the public defender. If you get one of those three on board, and obviously when I'm elected, you'll have me on board. You know, you can also go through the PD's office and clerk's office. But just once I think you get the technology running, I think that right now there may not be the cooperation there, but all of those offices are up for election in 2020, and so I think you'll get some real good cooperation there. Before I just want to say thanks so much for having me and for everything that you guys are doing. I think it's a really, really great organization, you know, the mission of bringing technology to effectuate social changes is extraordinary, and I think the criminal justice system is somewhere where that need is immediate, it's relevant, and so anyways, just thanks for everything that y'all are doing.
Awesome. Ryan, if you want to switch back to your screen just to go through the last slides. For folks that are still on the line, again, the slides you can be found on Meetup. It's linked next to the agenda for today's Meetup URL with Joe. And you can follow along with Ryan, the slides there. At the last slide has the Slack link, the self-invite link, as well as the discourse. So really the goal for new folks is to look at all the other brigades that exist throughout the US, just glance at some of the projects that they're working on. And of course, if you don't know what GitHub is, the first step is to familiarize yourself with GitHub. That's how we add projects and manage tasks. And yeah, if you have any other questions, reach out to Ryan, Quinn, or I on Slack or on Twitter. And yeah, we'd be happy to carry this conversation forward. And this is the first virtual meetup, but I think it went really well. I'll work on doing a summary with the video that we can share with folks who wasn't able to attend. And yeah, again, thanks everyone for joining. Any other final comments or thoughts? Ryan, great job. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Sweet. See y'all on
right.
Slack. And remember, if you have any questions, hit us up and get on the Slack channel. And we'll be able to keep this conversation going. Thanks, Joe. Have a great one.
Yeah, everybody have a great night. Please stay safe, stay well out there. And we'll see everybody online. All right. Bye.
Thank you.
That's
Bye.